as a message to Republicans. But I think, listen, I think this is a good thing, period, for women and just justice and the health of women. But politically, unfortunately, I think it's a good. Unfortunately, I think it is probably Democrats are going to take the wrong lesson from this and are going to just run Biden 2024 on abortion and stopping fascism and put together some and run on Bidenomics and keep this fairy dust bullshit going that the economy is great and things are improving, even though it's not. And I think that's a really, unless something happens before 2024, like maybe there's some leaked tape that comes out where Trump or DeSantis are caught saying, yeah, we'll go for a national ban. That I think would be an exception that would like rev up as many people that came out for the midterms that might have not come out otherwise. And I think something like that could save Biden's hide. But if you don't have something like that, I think the Supreme Court decision by the general election next year is going to wear off a bit. And I think if it's Biden versus Trump, if it was held today, Biden would be in trouble.
Interesting. What do you think about Cornel West and the potential no labels candidate? They talk about running Joe Manchin. Do you think that will make it harder for Joe Biden to win? Do you actually think that presents a serious chance of like spoiling the election, or do you not really think that that's going to affect the general election?
No, there's no empirical data that shows third-party candidates like Jill Stein voters or Cornel West voters that the majority of them would have voted for the Democrat if West wasn't running. Jill Stein's voters in 2016 surveys showed if she wasn't an option, they wouldn't have voted. And they, I'm pretty sure the CNN producers and anchors know this. They just, it's a better narrative that like, oh, he's pulling votes from Joe Biden. But think about it. Why would people be voting for Cornel West in the first place? There's not a lot of daylight. Like, there's not a lot of similarities between Joe Biden and Cornel West. The majority of the overwhelming amount of Democratic voters are the ones considering a third party, way more than Republican voters. So these are voters right now that are choosing, they're moving away from Biden. It's not that they've been taken away from Biden to Cornel West. They've gone away from Biden because of Biden and because of the Democrats, not because of an alternative. There was the recent New York Times poll that had Biden and Trump tied. The question was, if the election were held today, who would you vote for? Age 18 to 29, which I know you comrades are in that range. They said 9% of young people said we wouldn't vote. Less than 1%. Right. We'd vote for a third party.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Cornel West is going to spoil the election. I obviously don't buy into that line of logic whatsoever. But we also have this no labels candidacy, and they're courting Joe Manchin. And I do think there is a little more daylight between a guy like Joe Manchin and Joe Biden, right? I mean, they're both conservative Democrats. They both kind of harken back to an earlier era of like blue dog Democratic politics. So I do think that like Joe Biden does have some reason to be worried about Joe Manchin and, frankly, Cornel West. Not that if he loses, I would ever blame Cornel West. But I mean, we got this guy who's just so feeble, so uninspiring. And then we have another person who's Joe Biden's not really on the left, but that's how people think about it because we live in this Democrat Republican dynamic. And then we have this other guy who's also on the left, Cornel West, who's making a much more inspiring case. And I could see a lot of people that hear out Cornel West, people that would have voted for Biden saying, hey, I actually agree a lot more with this guy. He's, making the case for a politics that aligns with mine a lot better. So I will vote for him. Again, in no way would I ever blame Cornel West or third party voters, but I think it's fair that Biden should be a little bit worried. And I hope that makes him, I do hope it makes him worry. I hope it makes him, do some executive orders that appease progressives, or maybe go ahead and just legalize cannabis, win back some of those Green Party hippies. You know what I'm saying? Something like that.
Well, I'll start with no labels. If it is Joe Manchin, tell you the truth, I actually think it would help Biden, because I think more never Trump Republicans would vote for Joe Manchin. I don't really think a lot of Democrats who are disenchanted with Biden would vote for Joe Manchin. I mean, I think most Democrats hate Joe Manchin because he basically blocked everything that Biden, even though Biden wasn't going far enough for our liking. Manchin was basically blocking it, and he's pro fossil fuel, he's pro rich people, he's pro fracking. I think a lot of like never Trump Republicans who are aghast at everything Trump might actually think Joe Manchin is kind of like a compromise and like, oh, I never thought I'd vote for a Democrat, but Manchin's okay. So I actually think if Manchin ran in the swing states, I think potentially that could pull off Republican votes from Trump. On Cornel West,
Virginia to Biden.
Right. I don't even know because he's not even that popular in West Virginia.
Right.
On Cornel West, I actually think the biggest demographic that Cornel West can do well with is kind of black voters under 40, which Bernie did pretty well with. Well, all voters under 40, but particularly black voters. I actually think he could do well with some religious type voters because he happens to be a religious man. He drops Bible verses, things like that. Bernie's base, which was younger people, younger black people, Latinos. But the presidency is not about the country. It's about several states, unfortunately. So in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, I think the core demographic you'd be looking at is black men who Hillary Clinton lost in 2016 because there was less black men that came out for her compared to Obama 4 years earlier, less Hispanic men who came out for her and less young people. I think it could be the same thing for Biden. And if you split the baby and let's say of those groups, half of them don't vote and half of them go to Cornel West. Yeah, I mean, in those states, he could hurt Biden. But also, we got to remember, he can't really do anything for a year. He cannot win the Green Party nomination until the convention for a year. So I don't really know what his campaign is going to be other than continuing to do interviews because he could go around the country and do rallies, I guess, but he wouldn't be doing it as the Green Party nominee. He'd just be doing it like running for the Green Party nomination. So, I think he's not really going to have, if he gets mass media attention, he wouldn't have it until like the middle of next year when he becomes the nominee. And then his campaign obviously would be in full gear. So if you ask me today, I think the biggest threat for Biden is not Cornel West. I think the biggest threat is a depressed Democratic base, which includes black men, younger voters, Hispanic voters. And the polls show right now, he's been losing support among black voters, younger voters, Hispanic voters. Even Trump and the Republicans are doing better among these groups, that shows you how pathetic the Democratic Party is right now. I don't personally see enough evidence that the voters that are peeling off from Biden are going to necessarily go for Cornel West. But naturally, a lot of those voters you would think would be attracted to his message.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair analysis. One thing I did want to ask you about Cornel West, right, is I don't have experience with the kind of fortune that it would require to rack up this kind of a debt with the IRS. So I wanted to ask somebody, I don't know if you have experience with this kind of fortune, but sure as shit, you're smarter than I am, and you might be able to answer these questions. When you read that somebody owes the IRS $500,000, right? My guys, wait, what? Like, how do you owe the IRS that much? And of course, you're like, Donald Trump owes the IRS a shit ton of money, whatever. He hasn't been doing his taxes. But Cornel West isn't necessarily the guy I think of in a similar kind of a tax bracket. So I don't know. Is this just a non-issue? I think that obviously they're going after it because it creates the angle where it's like you want everybody else to pay their taxes and you don't even pay your own. I personally, whatever some I don't know what Cornel West's net worth is. Let's call it like 2 or 3 million because of book sales. I would like people with that kind of a net worth to pay their taxes. And I do think that that's an important part of functioning in a society. But like, I would be open to hearing some pushback as to why this isn't that big of a deal, because obviously the billionaires aren't paying their taxes either. But I do think it kind of flies a little bit in his political message, at least to like reach a normal person when he's, they're like, oh, you want to raise taxes? But like, wait, didn't I read you also didn't pay your own taxes? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah. Well, I have requested another interview with him, so I would certainly ask. He has not denied that he owes a good amount of money, but he disputes that number. So benefit of the doubt. I want to wait to hear from him on that. Listen, I don't know his net worth, but if you give paid speeches for many years, you're a well-known academic, taught at Harvard, Princeton. Those are good paying jobs. books. I'm sure he was doing well, which obviously the better you're doing, well, unless you have an army of accountants, you would owe more in taxes. Does Cornel West strike me as someone who's like just aggressively just choosing not to pay his taxes? No. There might be, some just he's an academic and not good with the details. I don't really know. That's not an excuse. Like, I'm not going to give him a benefit of the doubt I wouldn't give others. But I'd like to know more of the details, what he actually owes, why it hasn't been paid. Has there been, some discrepancy between what they're saying he owes? Sometimes, I've had with my taxes where I did pay an amount, but I'm still getting letters for that amount. And I call and they were behind. So I'd like to know what it is. I don't think it's the kind of thing where like somebody like, I don't think it's the kind of thing where he's just, a complete fraud that is running on these things, but is a deadbeat in his own.
No, that's why I found it so perplexing. Cause I'm like, dude, we were talking about it on air when the news broke, and we were like, that they're going to try and find every little thing about you, that they're going to raid your closet for skeletons, for anything that they can put out in the media. We heard all about Bernie's second house when the man's fucking 80 years old and he's been a senator. Like, yeah, almost every fucking United States senator has 2 houses. Like, basically all of them do. It's not that unheard of. But that was all we heard about. Oh, the socialist, he has 2 houses. And it's like, yeah, dude, that's because he's still working and he never fucking retired. And he probably paid off his first mortgage before he even made money from being a national figure like this. You know what I mean? So I want to give Cornel West the benefit of the doubt too. But it is also like, working class people, when you don't pay your taxes, like, you get crushed. And it's just like, so it kind of creates that dichotomy between, it's like, well, you want to be the like true representative of the working class, but like here you are making an argument that would only apply to a rich person. I just feel like it was a really effective way to tarnish his reputation. I don't want to like feed into it, but I was like, damn, this is how they're playing this one. And it felt like he created an opening.
I will say, I don't really think he answered it when he was asked. I think on the Breakfast Club, he kind of, I don't want to say dodged it, but didn't really fully answer it. So, he'll have to answer it for sure. And it's about who will ask. And I think this is the tip of the iceberg. If he keeps gaining momentum in polls, they'll be going after every speech he ever made, things that he said that might come off radical. We know they would have done that if Bernie had won the nomination. They'll go after, him having, children with different women, like, stupid stuff. So he's just got to be prepared. They're going to go personal and try to attack his character. And I think that, if not paying taxes is the worst thing, then I can accept that compared to the other choices.
Yeah. To me, it seems like Cornel West was kind of like he didn't really properly prepare to run for president. Like, he wasn't really planning on doing this until, I guess, what?
I think by launching with MPP, he didn't really prepare.
Right. Yeah. So I feel like Nick Brana like called him up and was like, "Hey, bro, you should totally run for president." And Cornel West was like, "Oh shit, maybe I should do that."
Dr. West, I have an idea. It's gonna make us both really relevant again.
Anyway, luckily he, took the advice of everyone, frankly, and ditched MPP. But I think it is still fair to say he didn't really get his like ducks in a row before he announced. People were talking about how like when they tried to sign up to volunteer on his website, it just sent them a blank like response with no ability to actually get involved in the campaign. They didn't like properly file with the FCC, all this stuff. And now there's this. It's like, maybe you should have figured out your IRS situation before announcing your presidency on a platform of taxing the rich. But again, I also want to give the dude the benefit of the doubt. I love Cornel West. I have no reason to think that he's like a fucking criminal or a hypocrite or anything like that. But God, if I do have one like note for the campaign, it would just be like, should have probably figured out some of this stuff before you announced, because now you have to deal with all of this crap, which is making you look a little bit more unserious than we'd like. But either way, I'm still hoping that the campaign goes well and that all these issues get resolved.
And also, he might legitimately owe taxes, and it wasn't like a nefarious thing. He just didn't have the money, tried to, set up some plan with the IRS, this and that. I have no idea. He just doesn't strike me as like a nefarious guy that would just like, yeah, no, fuck it. I'm going to go out and cite Karl Marx, but, dodge my taxes. So
yeah, we have no reason to think that he is nefarious or ill-intentioned whatsoever.
But I actually think, Cornel West, what's great about him is the way he talks, and it's inspiring and it's charismatic. But I do think he's going to have to bring a little bit more meat. And what I mean by that is it's great when he says, like, you got a neo-fascist in Trump and a hypocrite in Biden. That's great. But I would like after that, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to do that none of these frauds would do. Here's ABC executive action I would take.
Right.
Let them sue us. Here's how I would get X, Y, and because I think people, if they're going to consider a third party candidate, yes, it's important to inspire them and show that, you're going after the duopoly. But if you want to get more people that are not just Bernie leftists but if you want to get more normies to consider you, they need to be inspired, but also think like, oh, he's actually going to be able to accomplish things.
Yeah.
So maybe that will come. But so far in his interviews, I haven't really heard him give any specifics on what he will do. We know what he's for, but how will you get any of these things done?
Right. And I think hopefully we might be seeing the campaign enter like a new phase coming up, because Dr. Jill Stein did recently share this. She said, my transition to senior advisor for Cornel West for president. I am deeply honored to have served as acting campaign manager for the Cornel West for president campaign since June 10th. When Ajamu Baraka and I encouraged Dr. West to seek the Green Party nomination. I am gratified to have seen the campaign stabilize and grow, attract dedicated, talented staff, introduce itself to the Green Party at recent national meetings, and initiate multiple ballot access campaigns. These petition drives are now challenging the suppression of political choice across the country. With the campaign now poised to bring on experienced new team members, I am able to transition to a senior advisory role, where I can focus on challenging ballot access work that lies ahead. This will also free me up to return to the role I've played for the past 10 years as a former Green Party presidential candidate and informal spokesperson. So I think this is really important. They're kind of transitioning to bringing on more experienced people. And I think that's really important. I always say this, but when it comes to lefties and progressives running for office, they, in my opinion, really do need to surround themselves with people that really can get the fucking job done and have the experience necessary, not just a bunch of well-meaning activists, but actually people that know what they're doing in this space. So I really hope that Cornel West can bring on some people that know what they're doing and that have some serious experience at running successful campaigns, because I agree with a lot of your criticisms, Jordan.
Yeah. And also, just talking to people I know in this world, part of it also was he needed to kind of ingratiate himself and get into the Green Party world. Because to the masses, we've already moved on, but he still has to win the Green Party nomination. We would think that would be a slam dunk, but he hasn't really been active in the Green Party. So I was told over the last few weeks, he's just, been talking to different people with the Green Party, learning a little bit more about where things stand now, which obviously Jill Stein would be helpful with. But yeah, they definitely need an infrastructure. They need a working website, a working volunteer system, and a plan for this in-between period before he officially wins the nomination. Because interviews are good, but that's not the same thing as organizing. And, you don't want to go out and do mega rallies that kind of come off presumptuous, you're basically acting like you're already the nominee. You don't want to do that. But you definitely want to, start exciting people and getting energy out there. So it's kind of a fine line if you're going for the Green Party nomination that you can't technically get next year. Next year.
I do kind of disagree with that, because Bernie Sanders was doing huge rallies all around the country before he won he didn't, but before the Democratic nominee was officially decided, right? Trump was doing his huge rallies. That's kind of how he became popular enough to win the nomination. So I don't think Cornel West needs to wait until he wins the nomination. I think he should be hitting the ground ASAP. And I think that one of the problems with third-party candidates is that they don't have enough time to campaign. They enter into the election when the general election has already started, and they miss out on all of that primary season campaigning. That's why I'm an advocate of the dirty break strategy. That's why I always say I wish people like Cornel West started out in the Democratic primary and then jumped to the Green Party ticket after being fucked over by the rigged process, right? Because then you can soak up all that media attention. You can, get all those eyeballs on your campaign during the primary, which tons of people are paying attention to. Third party candidates often, they get kind of cut out of that whole process because, like you said, the nominee's not even decided until all of that's already gone. It's already passed. So I hope that Cornel West hits the ground and starts doing rallies and stuff, because I don't think anyone's going to beat him for the nominee. Like, who the fuck, Howie Hawkins is going to come back and, like, no one's going to beat him, in my opinion.
In this case, I disagree with you, and I'll tell you why. Because I think if it was an open primary, meaning Biden was an incumbent, it was just like 2020, any Democrat could run, I probably would agree with him running as a Democrat, just because even if, certain quarters say sell out, practically speaking, that would be the better chance to actually win. Yes, it would be rigged, but it's also rigged against him as a third party candidate. People just conveniently pretend that's not the case. I think he would have a better chance if in a Democratic primary, if there wasn't an incumbent Democrat. But if he ran in the Democratic primary this time, I don't actually think he'd be getting the media coverage he's getting now as a threat, because they wouldn't see him as a threat, because they would just rig it. That's why you have this tall glass of water, Dean Phillips, like this Minnesota congressman who's like
that guy, yeah.
going on Sunday shows saying there needs to be more primary challengers. He's practically begging Cornel West to like run in the Democratic Party. They want him to run in the Democratic Party, not for competition. So there is no competition, and he's not actually a threat. So in this case, I think he's getting more media attention, more buzz, because he actually is a threat, or they see him as a threat to in those states we talked about, peeling off votes. But if he ran in the Democratic primary, how much media attention nationally are they giving Marianne Williamson?
Right.
Virtually none.
I do think Cornel West,
they're giving attention to, but for negative reasons, not to actually look at his policies or give him a fair shake. I don't really think they would give Cornel West much attention. I think it would give Biden even more reason, and the DNC even more reason to say, we're not debating, we're not doing jack shit. So I think he made the right decision in this case, running third party.
I see where you're coming from, and to be honest, the stipulation for me with him running as a Democrat would be that he's promising to do the dirty break. So that would be the threat, saying I'm not going to endorse the eventual nominee if I lose. And I still do think they would see that as a threat. That's what Trump did in 2015. He said, "Yeah, I'm going to take advantage of the Republican Party primary, but fuck no, I'm not going to endorse Marco Rubio if he beats me." Right? I think if Cornel West did that and said, "Hey," and in fact, he could leverage that into doing debates. He could say, "Yeah, I'm going to take my fucking movement and my voters with me, and we're not going to vote for the incumbent unless you do some debates, unless you treat this primary seriously." And then he could actually leverage it into a huge win for the whole country, and that we could get a serious primary out of that. And he could still run as a Green Party candidate after the fact. You might remember that in 2016, Jill Stein offered Bernie Sanders the top of the ticket, the Green Party ticket. She said, I'll be vice president. You'll be the top of the ticket, after Bernie Sanders got screwed over by Hillary and the DNC. So I think there's a case for both strategies, but
my question would be who and how many people participate in the Green Party primary, because that would be the only one drawback. Because like part of your thesis, Gavin, is that like it would end up with Cornel West winning the Green Party nomination. What I would wonder about is what happens if Howie Hawkins somehow does end up winning the Green Party nomination. I mean, he won last time, right? And Jill Stein also, like, you know what I'm saying? So like, I think that did you participate in the Green Party primary in either of those years? Like, I just feel like they probably do have more of an insular community, and I could see the threat of somebody not liking the fact that you just like didn't win the Democratic Party and then coming in and assuming that the Green Party was just going to fall over and give you the nomination.
In 2016,
they did that in 2016 once. Jill Stein offered, but that wasn't the actual Green Party, primary saying we'll just give up on what we'd done, to do that, which is why I think the point that Jordan's making.
I feel that, but I will say Howie Hawkins barely even won the Green Party nomination last time. He almost lost it to this guy named Dario Hunter, who's a total no-name. Howie Hawkins is the fucking co-founder of the Green Party. So if he could just barely scrape by the nomination process last time from some no-name Dario Hunter, then I don't think he's going to pose a serious threat to Cornel West at all, nor do I think he will even challenge Cornel West. I don't think Howie Hawkins is that fucking delusional.
Not that listen, the Green Party is not exactly political savants. I think we could all agree. But I think at the end of the day, their main priority is getting as high of a percentage as they can. So if Cornel West made some noise in the Democratic primary and it got rigged, I think if he came out, I think he would come diplomatically, and I think they would, he would still win. But my point now is, I think, I see your point, Gavin, with they would take him seriously if he was threatening and he was saying, "Oh, you ain't holding debates, then I'm going to run general." yeah, that could technically work. But I kind of like it the way things are now. And frankly, at the end of the day, listen, I don't want Trump. I don't think anyone does here. But I also don't want to just play this old record and spin this old record over and over again, where right now we say, well, this time we just got to do it. We just got to hold our nose and do it, because we can't take Trump again, because then it's going to be this time in 2028 and this time in 2032. And it's always going to be, I don't see the Republican Party getting less fascistic in 4 or 8 years. So at a certain point, you have to stop with, and I also, based on my on the ground coverage, I think a lot of people are delusional that like the only threat of fascism is Republicans. There's different levels of fascism. Yes, there is fascism.
Don't tell that to Vosh, Jordan. Don't tell that to Vosh.
I don't really. Vosh has had quite an evolution from clips I've seen. But there's fascism with an authoritarian and white supremacist and nationalist, and then there's good old corporate fascism. I would say Standing Rock was fascism. There was an oil police basically bashing in Native Americans and environmental allies at the behest of an oil company. I'd say what's going on in Cop City right now is fascistic. And that's a Democratic mayor, Democratic senators, and we have a Democratic president. They assassinated an environmental protester and covered it up. And you have, they're arresting people for nothing and charging them with domestic terrorism, silence among Democrats. They're going after a publisher, Julian Assange, where Obama said legally or constitutionally, we cannot go after him, but Biden doesn't have a problem with it. I could go on and on. Sure, Trump is a threat, but let's not pretend that like we have a thriving democracy under Democrats, or there's no collusion or corporate fascism going on. And frankly, even if Trump doesn't become president, does anybody think the MAGA movement is just going to go in hibernation and there's less threat of fascism? I mean, a lot of the fascism, frankly, is coming from the state level. I mean, the Texas governor is trying to fucking throw parents in jail of transgender children. He's putting like barbed wire buoys in water against immigrants trying to come here.